Youth comes but once in a lifetime. Your whole life lies ahead of you, and the opportunities are endless.
It's a time when you can be carefree, whether it's playing hide-and-go-seek on the playground or driving with the windows down while blasting music with your best friends. Spirits are high, responsibility is low, and the bubble of innocence protects from the ills of our world. It's a time where magic still exists, imagination runs without limits, and miracles are still a possibility. Nothing is impossible.
It's a time to be reckless, yet learn from your mistakes, allowing you to evolve into the person that you will become. Laughter never ceases, dreams excite the mind, and creativity ignites innovation.
It's the best time of your life, the glory days. But before you know it, it's gone.
Albert Einstein once said, "Everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today on trial we have modern day schooling. Glad you could come. Not only does he make fish climb trees, but also makes them climb down and do a 10-mile run. Tell me, school, are you proud of the things you've done? Turning millions of people into robots, do you find that fun? Do you realize how many kids relate to that fish swimming upstream in class, never finding their gifts, thinking they are stupid, believing they are useless? Well, the time has come, no more excuses. I call school to the stand and accuse him of killing creativity, individuality, and being intellectually abusive. He's an ancient institution that has outlived his usage. So, Your Honor, this concludes my opening statement, and if I may present the evidence of my case, I will prove it.
As Maya Angelou once said, "My youth is escaping without giving me everything it owes me." Unfortunately, this could not be any more true for today's generation, as after-school playdates turn into group study sessions, and time for family is interrupted by beckoning assignments. Students are unable to break away from the obligations school has become. They are forced into fabricating their resumes and grasping desperately at perfect GPAs, while balancing extracurriculars and leaving little time for a healthy, youthful, social life. The current education system has not only failed, but has become materialized, distorting students' perceptions and crippling their development as the world's future. The old blueprints for education are no longer applicable. The education system as it stands is not only institutionally unsound, but has fostered a culture that breeds hyper-competitive students that are more focused on doing whatever it takes to get a letter grade, even at the expense of not gaining any knowledge. The result is students who are hardly even learning. Students dread coming to school, and that's no way to educate our youth. They are consequently forced into a cookie-cutter system.
Do you feel limited by the ways in which you must teach your class as weighted?
What has contributed to the defeat of our country's youth is rooted in the brokenness of the education system itself. According to education activist Sir Ken Robinson, diversity, curiosity, and inherent creativity are the key principles of the human mind. Our modern system of education creates a pattern of compliance that limits these principles so crucial to growth and progress as individuals and as a society. These limitations, however, do not only restrict the student, but the teacher as well.
That we're being forced into a cookie-cutter type of teaching style.
The curriculum doesn't necessarily limit the ways in which I teach. What does are some of the expectations, I think, in terms of instructional strategies. So you have to differentiate, you have to do group work, you have to, those are the things I think that impinge upon teacher creativity in the classroom, not necessarily the curriculum.
It's this educational malpractice where one teacher stands in front of 20 kids, each one having different strengths, different needs, different gifts, different dreams, and you teach the same thing the same way? That's horrific.
Due to mandated curriculum, teachers are confined to small content areas, and because of this, oftentimes their teaching methods are curtailed as well.
Some students, the curriculum is a great tool for them to learn the material. For others, like students who really can push beyond the basics, it's hard to get beyond the curriculum sometimes. And for students that it's a challenge to get to that curriculum. You still feel like you've got to just shove the information in and hope some of it sticks.
With overpopulated classrooms in many public schools, the individual needs of each student are rarely met.
Ideally, it would be great to teach every student where they are. In a class of 36, that's impossible. In a class of 20, it's almost impossible. The smaller classes, despite what everyone says about, oh, if you can teach one, you can teach 100, that isn't how a classroom works. And you know the difference between a small class and a large class, right? How distracting is a large class?
61. According to the New York Times, that's the percent of high school students deemed college ready after taking the ACT in 2016. Of those same students, only 41% of them were deemed college ready after the mathematics portion. In this current educational climate, the ultimate goal that students slave towards is admission into what they deem to be a, quote, good college. The selectivity of universities has also increased, and with that, the criteria for which they select applicants. Admission boards rely heavily on standardized testing, commonly the ACT and the SAT, in order to sift through students. The result is that millions become numbers rather than people.
The numbers do define you, because I notice like the stress levels like in my life and my friends, and it doesn't like reflect who I am and like my capabilities of like being a student, because maybe I'm not a good test taker, or maybe I just like wasn't feeling well that day, and so I really just don't think that our like ability to learn should be measured by like one test.
Well, I know I have a lot of friends who have like ADD and ADHD issues, and they're like, and like test anxiety stuff, and they're like super smart people, like regardless, but like because of the stress and the pressure that the ACT and SAT puts on them, and they're put at a disadvantage.
I think, especially for good students, bad test takers, it can affect their confidence. They know that they know the material, but they don't score well on an exam, and I think that can make them feel a little bit less confident about themselves and their grades and academics.
These tests have been denounced by educators, psychologists, and students alike as not being accurate assessments of intellect or cognitive ability.
With standardized tests, they think bubbling in a multiple choice question will determine success. That's outlandish. In fact, these tests are too crude to be used and should be abandoned, but don't take my word for it. Take Frederick J. Kelly, the man who invented standardized testing, who said, and I quote, "These tests are too crude to be used and should be abandoned."
Studies have shown that the school record, the grades in the courses with the academic rigor, that's a better predictor of success in college and life than these tests are.
Because these exams do not directly reflect material taught in high schools, preparation is its own stressful process.
You already have so much going on within your individual classes that you don't necessarily need one test to determine how well you've done over the whole semester.
The thing with the ACT and the SAT, to me it seems like it's more of a reflector of like privilege, because it would be great if there was something like the SAT or ACT that we could all take and like not prepare for at all, because that would be a better indicator of like where we are as students. But instead, if you have access to such resources, you can take extensive prep courses, which they don't reflect you being a better student necessarily. It reflects you putting a lot of time and money that other people might not have into something that's like extraneous.
"50. That's the percent of students who feel intensely stressed in school environments, and in accordance with the Princeton Review, that number is continuing to rise."
So I think stress is probably best defined as not only events and circumstances that people perceive as threatening, but also the way people then respond to those things that cause the threatening, which we call stressors.
I've never seen students so stressed out in my 21 years of teaching.
The most significant and likely the most detrimental effect of this tainted educational culture is stress. The extent of the pressures that students face is so immense that it often is impossible to hide.
You have grades you have to worry about, teachers liking you, and homework, and then you have to get enough sleep so that you can do stuff the next day. And when you fall behind, it gets even
more stressful?
I think the competition stresses me out the most, is that there's so much expected of us, and somehow each student has turned that into like a hierarchy.
I think there's just always like this constant like stress and pressure, even like now, like compared to like your other classmates. Like I've already thought about like how many like chords I'm gonna have at graduation next year compared to like how many chords like my smarter friends are gonna have.
Defeat is evident on students' faces, and constant exhaustion characterizes a teenager's lifestyle.
It's just my sleep schedule is so out of whack, and I get crap for it all the time, because obviously I, in the end, am, in control of how much I sleep, but I don't feel that way. Yes, I stay up really late on my phone, but it's only because I'm like defending myself and distracting myself from the amount of stress and pressure I'm under because of school. So I keep track of it with an app, and I get an average of 5 hours and 40 minutes. Literally. So I was talking to my psychiatrist, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get any sleep? And she was like, you guys put so much pressure on yourselves, and you don't understand that the school system is not made for a teenager's sleep schedule. Like, it just goes completely against what psychologically and physically, like, scientifically, what we need to, like, do well in this, like, growing body.
Weighted down by numerous obligations and responsibilities placed on them by both parents, teachers, counselors, and society as a whole, many students feel like they're suffocating.
I feel like the pressure to get into the right college and the pressure that you feel like you have to take so many courses to get into a good school, whatever anybody wants to define as a good school.
I definitely see kind of those really stressed out kids whose parents just are kind of just very narrowly focused on you need to get good grades and you need to go to college, you need to get a good job, and like all of those like capital, like what is a good job,
The effects of stress can evidently be destructing to a student's well-being.
There's this famous or well-known psychological principle known as the general adaptation syndrome, which essentially argues that prolonged stress actually begins to weaken the immune system of students who are experiencing it. If we were talking specifically about students, any of your anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, even depression has been linked to stressors.
So they'll come to me and they'll either have been worrying a lot and having difficulty sleeping, maybe they're losing weight, maybe they're gaining weight, they're not performing the way that they should, and they're complaining that something's not right.
A study completed by a team of researchers at NYU found that 26% of students were diagnosed with depression, which is over 4 times the national average of 6%.
I would say depression statistically is the most common disorder amongst all populations. It's particularly high amongst teenagers, and I would say the anxiety disorders would be high as well.
Not only do students fall captive to disorders such as depression and anxiety, they are unable to get sufficient sleep, their immune systems weaken, they lose confidence in themselves, and they oftentimes turn to harmful coping strategies.
It wasn't until high school till I started going to therapy because of the amount of stress I've been under, especially with competition. Like, at this age, we're already, comparing ourselves to everybody in terms of the way we look and the way we act and like our social standards, and then we have to add on to like our scores, and if we're going to get into that, like, it's ridiculous.
You teenagers are doing a lot, and you have a lot on your plate, and there's a sense that sometimes your sense of who you are is connected to what you're achieving, and so there's not a sense of necessarily being satisfied with who I am at that moment. It's what am I going to achieve?
Honestly, it just comes down to me hating myself for so many different reasons.
So we do find that kids will look for ways to feel relaxed, to calm, to reduce that stress. And sometimes alcohol and drugs can play a role in that because what could be considered self-medication, where they're trying to take away some of the negative thinking that they're having. So that definitely can play a role, and that can just add to the problems that they're already having.
75 to 95. That's the percent of students who admitted to cheating in high school, discovered in a survey conducted by Professor Eric Alderman at Ohio State University.
They know, as do many of us, that a whole bunch of people cheat. We know this. We're not stupid.
It's huge. Every single test you go into, there's always someone looking over at your paper, looking around the room, pulling out their phone.
All the time.
Although there must be some individual accountability, it cannot be overstated how heightened pressure levels has motivated students to do whatever it takes to pass the next exam or complete an essay assignment.
And quite frankly, I think that we've taken away the ability to fail. And so what's happened is kids are not learning from their own mistakes because they don't ever learn that there's a cost to anything that they do.
Like, it's just like a normal, like, ingrained part of, like, the school system now. Because, like, kids are stressed out, and so they're going to turn to, like, what's easier to help them get a better grade, because that's all that, like, colleges really see. So if it's cheating, then it's cheating.
I actually deal with more referrals for academic dishonesty in this school coming from advanced placement and gifted accelerated classes than I do college prep level classes in many cases. And those students will cite sometimes to me the pressure to be successful.
With that being said, cheating has become a more attractive alternative. Academic dishonesty is not a nuanced concept. In fact, this materialistic education system allowed it to evolve into the problem evident today.
And unfortunately, it's gotten a lot easier to cheat because of cell phones. You know, I do see that technology is a tool that can be used for good or for ill.
Cheating is an epidemic that harms all parties, especially the individual.
I think the kids that do this, they're lucky if they get caught early, because what happens later on is they'll get caught in a situation where they're not competent for their job, and that could cause them problems, or they could get caught cheating on a much higher level and land in jail.
It is one of the greatest impediments to the learning process, yet it is facilitated by the very institution that seeks to destroy it.
So in that sense, in order for something to be an effective deterrent, you have to be able to, you know, catch and penalize most of the people who are guilty of it, and I can't say that that's the case.
So much cheating, I don't think teachers can catch it. Students nowadays are too good at hiding their answers and looking over and not letting the teacher find them.
I think the culture at large is responsible for what's happening in education.
With all the hysteria that surrounds the current educational atmosphere, many people feel that they are playing a game. The flawed race of life formulation that plagues so much of American society affects the culture of education as well. Students have simply given up trying to understand and apply material. Instead, they have realized that all that is necessary to advance to the next stage is to cram their heads with effectively useless facts that are quickly forgotten after the class is over. They simply do what is necessary to get the A and bump their GPA, rather than learning because they enjoy it.
Especially at Dunwoody High School, we have this environment of, especially within the AP community, where everyone feels as if I've got to take 14 APs, and they do that merely for grade inflation on GPA, which has nothing to do with learning.
We offer anywhere from 23 to 25 AP courses here at Dunwoody High School. But rather than taking it because they enjoy it, because it's a content that they like, they're taking it because this is what I have to do to get into Georgia. This is what I have to do to get into Tech.
But I think we have kind of like put a mindset that you guys have to take 4 APs by the end of your sophomore year. And if you don't have at least 4, you're a loser. And that's not acceptable. Like, there are kids that take 7, 8 APs a year. Like, why are they doing that? They're not doing it for the knowledge.
There's almost a discrediting of students that are working hard for the content.
Not only that, but they fluff their applications with a variety of extracurriculars.
Regular activities are baseball,
The Dunwoody Dive Team,
SGA, cross country,
lacrosse,
Boy Scouts, Rho Kappa, Spanish Club,
Nu Alpha Theta,
SGA, cross country, tennis, Dunwoody lacrosse,
Beta Club, Habitat for Humanity,
NHS, swimming,
Dunwoody baseball,
DECA,
FCA, Social Club,
Dunwoody football,
Varsity Cheer, National Science Honor Society,
swimming,
DECA,
junior class treasurer, FCA.
Due to all of this, the competition to be admitted into college is greater than ever before. Students are constantly comparing themselves to their peers and striving to reach the top of this hierarchy.
They're always telling you, oh, you've got to get the A's to get into the best schools, and the best schools would also make it hard to get into if you didn't fit this cookie cutter style. So now everybody's going out of their way to all be alike, which has never been the goal.
I think there's more of an emphasis today. When I was growing up, everybody could go to college. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to get into college, trust me. Now, people that I know, friends of mine, their kids can't get into Georgia or Georgia Tech.
Because of that increase in competition, one of the things that I've seen within my students is this compulsion for numbers. You'll find that very many students, especially in gifted accelerated classes, come into school with this belief that if they get a B, they're not going to college. I had one who told me that if he got a B, he was going to live under a bridge. When in all reality, that is not the case. And you see that within class dynamics as well. You pass back a test, and the first thing everyone does is, what did you get? And so there's a comparison and a constant competition, which in a lot of cases can be healthy. You want a healthy competition. You want students to drive themselves. What I'm worried about is that it's getting to the point where it is no longer healthy.
Always asking, well, what did you get on this test? What did you get? Oh my God, I got a blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, I'm like making up excuses for why I didn't do so well on a test is something that like I've gotten so good at just to like as a defense mechanism, because everybody is just so like competitive and like predatory when it comes to each other's scores and like knowing where we're at. I told somebody that I consider I'm pretty good friends with that I'm going to Georgia College the other day, and he goes, wait, I thought you were smart. And I was so taken aback. It's like, I am smart, and I've had to convince myself of that because, yeah, it sucks that I didn't get into UGA, but because it's so competitive, and because, like everybody has that mindset, like, what defines if I'm smart or not? Like.
However, the next stage, college, does not operate in the same way that high school does. Students who have labored countless hours just to be admitted drop out or transfer within their first year because of their lack of preparation, and for some, ignorance to the many social conventions that come with being an independent young adult.
I don't know, it's sad because you're right, you're not going to be ready for even the college, like how you're going to have 2 or 3 tests and that's all you're going to have.
When you guys do go into the world, or when any student goes into the world, it's not just going to be a cut and dry, this is what you do, then you get this result, and nothing else happens. Like, life throws stuff at you, and you have to be able to creatively adapt and creatively think about how you're going to either bounce back or address these issues.
Data shows us that many students who go on to college with that sort of false sense of confidence often falter freshman year.
So much of what you can learn in social studies that you can take with you into the future is the ability to critically analyze documents and sources and do something with that information. So I know we as teachers try really hard to do that in class often, but sometimes it's like, let me just lecture and get some of this content. And how important is it that you know how the War of 1812 ended, right? Versus how important is it for you in any career to be able to analyze documents and make a plan for whatever business it is that you're working to move forward.
Although it has come a long way, educational reform has stalled in recent years. Policymakers take pride in pointing out figures that indicate increases in overall student proficiency.
I passed a bill a number of years ago which provided all these career pathways. It provided, when you were in 9th grade, an individual graduation plan. It provided remedial education for 11th and 12th graders based on, I think it's the Compass test in 10th grade, I think that's what it's called. And also dual enrollment, where it really opened up dual enrollment for young people to get them engaged.
According to former Secretary of Education Duncan Arnn, since 1971, 8th grade reading and math scores have gone up 8 points and 19 points respectively. Additionally, the percent of Americans between the ages of 25 and 29 with a 4-year college degree has increased from 23% in 1980 to 36% today.
Now, here in DeKalb, I think Stephen Green, the new superintendent, I think he's making a lot of progress in the schools that needed improvement. I think he's done a lot of efforts from the academic standpoint. I may not agree with everything Dr. Green's done, But I do think he's put an increased emphasis on that, particularly in what I'll call, which were our lower performing schools.
Although almost all U.S. states have raised standards, the country as a whole still has one of the highest high school dropout rates in the world.
You know, I'll give you an example. Nationally, probably the 6-year college graduation rate is 56%. Now, where you and I come from, that's failure, I believe, at your current level.
The achievement gaps between races, genders, and classes are still evident, displaying that 15 years of new programs, testing, and standards have not improved the conditions in the United States.
When it all's said and done, I watched it in the state of Georgia. I can remember we used to say the graduation rate under a certain governor was 80%. It's really 68 to 70%. People inflate numbers to make themselves look good.
No child left behind, leaving children actually behind. That's the claim a growing number of parents are making, and now one parent says he's taking an extraordinary step to save his son from what he considers is a failing education.
I think by having this conversation is a really great step in the right direction of not having cookie cutter students.
As stated by the education activist Richard Williams, 20% of our population is 100% of our future. But 20% of our population is hindered by the very foundation of their future, education. Today, diplomas come weighted down with the pressures of the current academic environment, and success has become defined not only by the diploma that you hold, but the test scores you achieve, the amount of extracurriculars you involve yourself in, and the letter grade on your report card. What used to be the most lively, most creative, most inspiring 20% of our population has been defeated by a systematic culture that disregards passion, creativity, and inspiration. Childhood is no longer childhood. Teenage years are no longer just teenage years, and adulthood approaches faster than ever. What can stop this cycle from destroying this construct of youth that is so important to society? Life is not a race, nor a game. The goal for our youth should be pursuing happiness in individual ways. An educational system that provides youth with the means of actively pursuing this happiness is what is needed. A successful system will carry students with varying assets and deficits to adulthood, supplied with the knowledge of what they enjoy doing and how to do these things well.
So getting enough sleep for all kids, whether or not they're feeling anxious, getting enough sleep, eating properly, exercising, taking time to do something that they enjoy and not just feel like they need to be achieving is going to be helpful for anybody.
The means of crafting our youth into our future is founded upon education. When education transforms into a culture of hyper-competitiveness, our population no longer delivers visionary, expressive youth. Instead, piece by piece, students are systematically molded into a cookie-cutter culture. Rather, we need to prepare our students for the future. We must encourage them to think creatively, problem solve, and not just simply memorize facts. The system must move away from the simple game of education, and instead work to bring out the strengths and reach the capabilities of each student. Students will therefore ease the stresses of academic culture while learning how to develop into progressive human beings. This quality education provides the means for students to break out of the molds of cookie-cutter kids.
I think I do enjoy learning a lot, like when it doesn't feel like I'm being forced to learn, when it's something that I've already shown interest in. I love learning new things.
I do not believe in teaching to the test. I hope you do well if you take the AP test, but my main goal is that you get really good exposure with your algebra skills and learn how to think and problem solve, because the test is just a test. But for the next class and the next class, that's one of the main reasons that I always say it doesn't matter about the test. And if I was just teaching for a test, I would lose a whole bunch of kids.
Well, there's a whole test optional movement. There's about 1,000 colleges and universities right now that have made standardized testing simply an optional part of their admissions process, not a requirement. And I think that there's a lot of merit to that. I think that your academic record, the essay, maybe an interview, your extracurriculars give admissions officers a better picture of you than your standardized test.
No more Common Core. Instead, let's reach the core of every heart in every class. Sure, math is important, but no more than art or dance. Let's give every gift an equal chance.
Like, it's really been shown that, your spirit and your soul thrives when you are creating and when you're expressing yourself, and, those emotions, like, we're not just robots. Like, we need to express our feelings and emotions in art.
I would say to you that for a young person today, my advice would be at the end of the day, You find something in your life that makes you happy, and when you get out of bed in the morning, okay, you're glad to go do it, versus people where it's drudgery.
This is a world in which I believe, a world where fish are no longer forced to climb trees. I'll rest my case.